Finlay liked quiet mornings. While other children rushed and clattered and shouted, Finlay preferred to sit by his bedroom window and watch the clouds drift like slow ships across the sky. He wondered where they were sailing, perhaps to a land made of feathers, or a place where birds spoke in riddles. Or maybe, he thought, they were explorers just like he wanted to be. Finlay loved imagining. On this particular morning, the sunlight slipped gently through his curtains and painted soft stripes across the floor. He padded over in his socks and knelt beside his toy box. Inside were puzzles, crayons, a wooden train, and a soft green dinosaur with stitched-on spots and kind button eyes. "Good morning, Stan," Finlay said quietly. Stan did not roar. Stan did not stomp. Stan was the sort of dinosaur who seemed to understand mornings should begin gently. Finlay picked him up and brushed a bit of lint from his tail. "I think today might be an adventure day." Stan, being a very thoughtful dinosaur, agreed silently. Finlay carried him downstairs, where the house still felt sleepy. The kettle hadn't begun to hum yet, and the clock ticked politely instead of loudly. Finlay liked polite sounds. He opened the back door and stepped into the garden. The air smelled like damp leaves and growing things. Dewdrops clung to the grass like tiny glass beads. Finlay crouched low so Stan could see them too. "They look like a necklace for ants," Finlay whispered. Stan thought that was a very fine idea. Finlay always felt that the world was friendlier when you looked at it closely. He noticed small things, the way ladybirds paused before taking off, the way worms curled like commas in the soil, the way breezes seemed to sigh as they passed the flowers. Suddenly, he spotted something unusual near the old stone path. A tiny wooden door. It was tucked into the roots of the big oak tree, no taller than Finlay's hand, with a round brass knob and a painted blue frame. Finlay blinked. "Stan," he said softly, "that wasn't there yesterday." Stan agreed. He was quite sure he would have remembered a door. Finlay didn't rush toward it. He believed new discoveries should be greeted politely, the way you greet a shy animal. So he crept slowly, step by careful step, until he knelt beside the tree roots. The little door was beautifully made. Swirls were carved into the wood, and above it hung a sign no bigger than a postage stamp. Finlay squinted and read aloud, "Kind visitors welcome." Finlay's face warmed with a smile. "Well," he said, "that's lucky. We are kind." Stan felt proud to be included. Finlay tapped gently on the tiny door. They waited. Nothing happened. A breeze stirred the oak leaves overhead. Somewhere a pigeon cooed. The world stayed peaceful and still. Finlay did not feel disappointed. Some doors, he knew, opened in their own time. He leaned closer and whispered, "Hello, my name is Finlay. This is Stan. We don't mean any trouble. We just like exploring." For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, click. The tiny brass knob turned all by itself. Finlay's eyes grew round as marbles. Stan, who was brave but sensible, thought this was exactly the sort of thing that meant an adventure was beginning. The tiny door creaked open just a sliver. Finlay did not push it. He did not grab it. He simply waited, because he believed that when something small trusted you, the kindest thing to do was be patient. The door opened a little wider. Inside was a soft golden glow, like candlelight mixed with sunshine. It spilled gently onto the roots of the oak tree and warmed Finley's toes through his socks. "Well," Finley whispered, "that looks friendly." Stan agreed. It did not look like the sort of glow that belonged to anything frightening. It looked like the sort of glow that might say hello if it could talk. Finley lay on his tummy so he could see better. He peered through the doorway. Inside was a tiny hallway. There were even tinier paintings on the walls, each in delicate frames. One showed a field of mushrooms. Another showed a teacup bigger than a house. Another showed a smiling beetle wearing a hat. Finley smiled back at the beetle. "Do you think they like visitors?" he asked Stan. Stan believed they might, especially visitors who knocked politely and introduced themselves. Finley cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me," he said into the doorway. "Thank you for opening. Your hallway is very lovely." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice, soft as moth wings, drifted out. "Thank you for noticing." Finley's eyes widened, but he didn't jump. He had always thought that if he ever heard a mysterious voice, he should treat it like a new friend instead of a surprise. "You're welcome," he replied calmly. "I'm Finley. This is Stan. We like exploring and being helpful when we can." There was a pleased sort of silence. Then the voice said, "Helpful visitors are the very best kind." The golden glow brightened a little, as if it were smiling. A tiny figure stepped into view. She was no taller than Finley's hand, with gossamer wings that shimmered like soap bubbles. Her hair curled like fern leaves, and she wore a dress stitched from flower petals. She bowed politely. "I am Luma," she said, "keeper of small doors." Finley bowed back because it felt like the right thing to do. "It's nice to meet you, Luma." Stan also bowed, though being made of plush made it more of a gentle flop. Luma giggled, a sound like wind chimes far away. "I opened the door," she explained, "because I saw you watching the dewdrops instead of stepping on them. That is how I know you are careful." Finley felt proud in a quiet way. He didn't puff up or boast, he just nodded. "I like small things," he said. "They're easy to miss if you hurry." "That is very true," said Luma, "and that is why I need your help." Finley listened closely. Helping was one of his favourite kinds of adventures. "Our path," Luma said, pointing behind her, "has gone missing." "Gone missing?" Finley repeated. "Yes, it leads to the Meadow of Maybe, where ideas grow. Without it, the creatures there cannot find their way home." Finley thought about that. A meadow where ideas grew sounded like the most important place imaginable. "How does a path go missing?" he asked gently. "It wanders," said Luma. "Paths do that sometimes when they feel forgotten." Finley considered this very seriously. He understood how something might wander off if no one noticed it. "Well," he said, "we could help you look for it, if that would be all right." Luma's wings fluttered with delight. "Oh, that would be wonderful, but you must come inside." Finley glanced at Stan. Stan, who had always secretly hoped to visit a magical hallway behind a tiny door, thought this was an excellent plan. Finley lay a little closer to the doorway. The golden light stretched outward, warm and gentle, like it was inviting them in. He took a calm breath. "All right," he said softly. "We're ready." And very carefully, because adventures should always begin carefully, Finlay and Stan began to go through the tiny door beneath the tree. Finlay had never climbed through a door so small before. He expected it might feel cramped or scratchy or uncomfortable. But as he gently leaned forward, something curious happened. The doorway stretched. Not quickly, not suddenly. It stretched the way a yawn stretches, slow and easy and polite. The frame widened, the ceiling lifted, and the warm, golden light wrapped around him like a soft blanket. Stan came too, tucked safely under Finlay's arm. When they were all the way inside, the doorway quietly shrank again behind them until it was just the right size for Luma. Finlay looked around. The hallway was beautiful in a quiet way. The floor was made of smooth, pale wood that felt warm even through his socks. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell. Tiny lanterns floated near the ceiling, glowing softly like sleepy stars. "Oh," Finlay breathed. Stan agreed. It was an "oh" sort of place. Along the walls hung more miniature paintings. Finlay walked slowly past them, careful not to bump anything. He clasped his hands behind his back the way he did in museums, because it helped him remember to be gentle. One painting showed a river made of ribbon. Another showed a mountain shaped like a teapot. Another showed a parade of snails carrying flags. Finlay stopped at that one. "They look very organized," he said quietly. "They are," said Luma, fluttering beside him. "Snails take celebrations seriously." Finlay nodded. That seemed sensible. They continued down the hallway together, their footsteps soft. The air smelled faintly of honey and rain. At the far end stood 3 tiny doors side by side. One was painted moss green, one was painted sky blue, one was painted sunset orange. Each had a small sign above it. Finlay leaned close to read them. Green door, gentle places. Blue door, thinking places. Orange door, possible places. Finlay liked the sound of all of them. "Which one leads to the Meadow of Maybe?" he asked. Luma pointed to the orange door. "Possible places," she said. "That is where wandering paths like to roam." Finlay knelt so he was level with it. The orange paint shimmered slightly, as though it had once been sunlight and remembered how. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he asked, "Is there anything we should know before we go in?" Luma's wings hummed thoughtfully. "Yes," she said. "In possible places, things can become real if they are imagined kindly." Finlay considered that very carefully. "Kindly imagined," he repeated. "Yes, if someone imagines something unkind, the meadow grows prickly. But if someone imagines something gentle, it grows soft." Finlay looked at Stan. Stan looked back with his stitched-on smile. "I think," Finlay said slowly, "we should imagine helpful things." Luma clasped her tiny hands. "That is exactly right." It felt warm, like it had been waiting. "Ready, Stan?" he whispered. Stan was always ready for gentle adventures. Finlay turned the little knob. The door opened with a quiet click. A breeze drifted out, fresh and grassy and full of the smell of growing things. It brushed Finlay's cheeks like a friendly hello. Beyond the doorway stretched a wide meadow glowing with soft, dreamy light. Hills rolled in the distance like blankets. Floating seeds drifted through the air like slow snow. And winding through the grass was a path. But it wasn't staying still. It was lazily sliding this way and that, curling and uncurling like a ribbon that couldn't decide where it wanted to lie. Finlay's eyes shone. "I think," he whispered, "we found it." The meadow was very quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet, the peaceful kind. Finlay stepped through the orange door with soft care, the grass bending politely beneath his socks. Stan came too, tucked close, his button eyes shining at the wide and wonderful view. Behind them, Luma fluttered out like a drifting petal. The wandering path lay ahead, looping gently across the meadow. It shimmered faintly, as if it were made from moonlight and dusted with flour. Every few moments it would slide a little to the left, then drift a little to the right, then curl into a spiral and uncurl again, like it was stretching after a nap. "It looks restless," Finlay said. "Yes," said Luma softly. "Paths wander when they feel forgotten." Finlay crouched low so he wouldn't seem too tall or too loud. He knew that when something felt unsure, it helped to be small and calm. "Hello, path," he said kindly. The path paused, just for a moment. Stan noticed it first. He always noticed small changes. The shimmering line stopped its curling and lay still, as if it were listening. Finlay smiled gently. "My name is Finlay. This is Stan. We came to help, if that's all right." The path gave a tiny wiggle. Not a runaway wiggle, a curious one. "I think it hears you," whispered Luma. Finlay stayed crouched. He didn't rush closer. He remembered that kindness often meant giving others time. "You don't have to hurry," he told the path. "We can wait." The breeze drifted over the meadow, carrying the scent of clover. Floating seeds bobbed slowly past like little boats. The path slowly uncurled. It stretched itself out straighter than before, though it still trembled a little, like someone who wasn't quite sure if they were welcome. Finlay tilted his head. "Did you wander off?" he asked softly. "Because no one walked on you anymore?" The path shimmered. A faint ripple moved along it from end to end. Luma nodded gently. "That is how paths feel lonely," she explained. "They are meant to lead. When no one follows them, they think they are not needed." Finlay thought about that very seriously. "I would feel sad too," he said. Stan agreed. Even a plush dinosaur liked to feel useful. Finlay reached into his pocket and pulled out a small crumb of biscuit he had saved from breakfast. He placed it carefully beside the path. "This is for you," he said. "It's not much, but it's a thank you for waiting for travellers." The path glowed a little brighter. It curled in a soft loop around the crumb, not taking it, just holding it gently, the way someone might hold a gift they wanted to keep safe. "I think it likes you," said Luma. Finlay's cheeks warmed. "I like it too." The path slowly stretched forward, then backward, then forward again. It was still wandering. "Maybe," Finlay said thoughtfully. It doesn't remember where it's supposed to go. Luma's wings gave a quiet flutter. Oh dear, she said. You may be right. Finlay looked across the wide meadow of soft hills and drifting seeds. Somewhere out there, creatures were waiting for this path to come home. He stood up slowly. Well, he said, calm as morning light, then we'll just have to help it remember. The path gave a hopeful little ripple. Stan felt certain this was the beginning of something important. The meadow waited quietly. Finlay stood very still, thinking. He had learnt that the best ideas often arrived when you gave them space, like birds landing when you didn't chase them. The wandering path lay before him, gently rippling like a ribbon in slow water. It didn't look lost anymore. It looked hopeful. Finlay rested his hands on his knees and spoke softly. If we want to help it remember, he said, we should think about where it belongs. Luma hovered beside his shoulder, her wings humming like a tiny lullaby. The path leads to the Meadow of Maybe, she said. That is where ideas grow into real things. Finlay nodded. Ideas were important. He imagined them like seeds, some tiny, some large, some silly, some serious, all waiting for the right place to sprout. He looked down at the path. Do you remember the Meadow of Maybe? He asked gently. The path shimmered. Not a big shimmer, a thoughtful one. Finlay smiled. That's all right. Sometimes I forget things too. When I do, I try to remember how they feel instead of how they look. The path gave a curious little ripple. Yes, Finlay continued. Maybe you don't need to remember the way. Maybe you just need to remember the feeling. Luma clasped her hands. Oh, she whispered. That is very wise. Finlay thought about meadows. How does the Meadow of Maybe feel? He asked. Luma closed her eyes. It feels like when you almost remember a dream, she said. It feels like when someone says, perhaps. It feels like the moment before a story begins. Finlay listened carefully. He imagined that feeling in his mind, soft and open and full of possibilities, like a page waiting for a drawing. He looked back at the path. Can you feel that? He asked it. The path glowed faintly. A slow warmth spread along its length, like sunrise sliding across the ground. I think it can, Luma whispered. Finlay took one small step onto the path. It did not wriggle away. Instead, it held still beneath his feet. Stan, tucked in Finlay's arm, felt the gentle hum of it. Not a sound exactly, more like a quiet happiness. You don't have to hurry, Finlay told the path kindly. We can walk together. He took another step. The path stretched forward, just a little, not wandering, leading. Finlay's eyes brightened. Look, Stan, he said softly. It remembers how. The path extended again, slowly forming a gentle curve through the meadow grass. Floating seeds drifted aside politely to make room. Luma spun in the air, scattering sparkles of light. You're helping it, she chimed. Finlay shook his head. We're helping each other. The path glowed warmer at that. Step by step, Finlay walked, and with every step, the path grew steadier, straighter, surer of itself. It no longer curled in confusion. It no longer slid away. It led. Far across the meadow, something shimmered into view. Soft shapes rising from the grass, like ideas deciding to become real. Luma pointed, her wings trembling with delight. "There," she whispered, "the Meadow of Maybe is coming back." Finlay felt a quiet joy bloom inside his chest. Not loud joy, the calm kind. The kind that felt like sunshine resting on your shoulders. He looked down at the path beneath his feet. "You didn't forget after all," he told it gently. "You just needed someone to walk with you." The path gave the tiniest, proudest glow. The path carried them forward, smooth and steady now, like it knew exactly where it wanted to go. Finlay walked calmly, one step at a time. He didn't rush. He wanted the path to feel proud of itself, and proud things, he knew, should never be hurried. Ahead, the meadow began to change. At first, it was only a shimmer in the air, like heat rising from sun-warmed stones. Then soft shapes appeared, as though someone invisible were gently sketching them into the world. A hill puffed up from the grass. A tree stretched its branches wide. A pond blinked into being and gave a small, watery sigh. "The Meadow of Maybe," Luma whispered. Her voice sounded softer than ever, as if she was speaking inside a dream. Finlay gazed around slowly. Everywhere he looked, ideas were growing. A patch of flowers shaped like stars swayed nearby. A cloud floated low enough to pat. A line of stepping stones arranged themselves carefully across the pond, as if they were practicing being helpful. Stan's button eyes shone. "This place," Finlay said quietly, "is very good at imagining." Luma nodded. "It is where ideas come to see if they would like to be real." Just then, a tiny creature peeked from behind a mushroom. It looked a little like a rabbit, and a little like a teapot, and a little like something no one had named yet. It blinked at Finlay. Finlay blinked back. "Hello," he said gently. The creature twitched its whiskers. Then it stepped out, followed by another and another. Soon a whole cluster of small, curious beings gathered nearby, some shaped like question marks, some shaped like pillows, some shaped like things that wobbled politely. "They couldn't find their way home while the path was wandering," Luma explained softly. "They were waiting." Finlay crouched low so he wouldn't seem towering or loud. "I'm glad you waited," he told them. One of the creatures, shaped rather like a thimble with feet, toddled forward and placed something in the grass near him. It was a tiny bell made of light. "For you," Luma translated gently. "It's a thank you." Finlay smiled, warm and quiet. "That's very kind." He didn't pick it up right away. Instead, he said, "Would you like me to ring it?" The little creatures nodded eagerly. Finlay lifted the bell and gave it the softest shake. Ting! The sound floated through the meadow like a silver feather. All around them, new ideas began to sprout. A kite unfolded from the air. A staircase leaned politely against a cloud. A small rainbow curled itself into a hammock. Stan thought this was a very sensible way for a meadow to behave. The path beneath Finlay's feet glowed brighter than ever now. It stretched proudly from the orange door all the way into the Meadow of Maybe, perfectly still, perfectly sure. "You remembered," Finlay told it. The path shimmered with quiet happiness. Luma folded her hands and bowed to Finlay and Stan. "You have helped more than you know," she said, "because you were kind, because you were patient, and because you imagined gently." Finlay felt that warm sunshine feeling again inside his chest. "I think," he said thoughtfully, "the path helped us too." Luma smiled. "The best adventures are like that." A soft breeze drifted across the meadow, carrying the scent of fresh ideas and growing dreams. The creatures settled happily along the path, safe and content now that their way home had returned. Finlay looked around at the peaceful hills, the floating seeds, the quiet wonders. "This," he said softly to Stan, "might be the loveliest place we've ever explored." Stan agreed, and the meadow, hearing that, seemed to glow just a little more. The Meadow of Maybe felt peaceful in the way a lullaby sounds. Finlay stood quietly, holding the tiny bell of light in his hand. It was warm, but not hot, like it had been sitting in sunshine. The small creatures gathered around his feet watched him with bright, hopeful eyes. He gave the bell another gentle shake. Ting! A soft ripple of sparkle drifted across the grass. Where the sound touched, little changes happened. A pebble turned into a ladybird. A blade of grass curled into a tiny chair. A puff of breeze shaped itself into a polite bow and then floated away again. Finlay's eyes widened slightly. "It makes things," he whispered. "It helps things become," Luma corrected kindly. Finlay liked that better. He knelt and placed the bell carefully on the ground. "I think it should stay here," he said. "This is where it belongs." The small creatures nodded eagerly, as if they agreed with every word. Kindness, after all, often meant knowing when something wasn't yours to keep. The bell glowed softly, pleased. Just then, one of the question mark creatures wobbled closer to Finlay. It tilted its curved body and made a tiny humming sound, like it was asking something without using words. "I think it has a question," Luma said. Finlay nodded. "All right," he told the creature. "I'll try to answer." The creature wiggled its curl and pointed one small foot towards Stan. "You want to know about him?" Finlay guessed. The creature bounced, "Yes." "This is Stan," Finlay said, holding him up gently. "He's a dinosaur. He's very good at adventures and listening and staying calm." Stan felt proud, but stayed modest about it. The creature leaned closer and tapped Stan's stitched nose. Then it made a happy little trill. "I think," Luma translated, "it says it would like to be something too." Finlay tilted his head. "You already are something," he said gently. "You're you." The creature paused. It had never thought of that. It slowly straightened its curl, considering. "You don't have to change," Finlay continued kindly. "But if you want to grow into something new, you can imagine what that might be." The creature hummed thoughtfully. Finlay waited. He had learned that imagination works best when you don't rush it. After a moment, the creature's shape began to shimmer. Its curves softened. Its little feet stretched. Its body brightened like morning light through a window. And then, it became a tiny lantern. Not a bright lantern, a gentle one. The sort that glows just enough to help someone find their way. Luma clasped her hands. "Oh," she breathed, It chose to be helpful. Finlay smiled. That's a lovely choice. The little lantern flickered happily and floated a few inches above the ground, lighting a soft golden circle in the grass. Other creatures began to murmur excitedly. A few wobbled as if they were thinking about what they might like to become someday. Stan watched them all and felt something warm and steady inside his plush chest. The feeling that comes when everything is just right. Finlay looked around the meadow once more. The path was steady. The creatures were home. The ideas were growing. He turned to Luma. Do you still need our help? Luma shook her head, smiling. You've already given the greatest help, she said. You reminded the meadow what kindness feels like. Finlay felt shy at that and looked down at his socks. I just walked with the path, he said. Yes, Luma replied softly. That is often all kindness is. A gentle breeze drifted past, stirring the grass in slow waves. The tiny lantern creature floated near Finlay and gave a grateful glow. Finlay gave a small wave back. He had a feeling their adventure wasn't over yet. And the meadow seemed to feel it too. The breeze shifted softly across the Meadow of Maybe, like a page being turned. Finlay noticed it first. He always noticed small changes. The grass swayed in a new direction. The floating seeds drifted in a gentle swirl instead of straight lines. Even the tiny lantern creature tilted slightly, its glow pointing toward the far side of the meadow. Finlay followed its light with his eyes. Far beyond the hills, something faint shimmered in the air. It wasn't bright, it wasn't loud. It was the sort of shimmer you might miss if you blinked too quickly. Luma, Finlay said quietly. What's that? Luma fluttered up beside him and looked. Oh my, she whispered. What is it? Finlay asked. It's a map, she said. Finlay blinked. I don't see one. That's because it isn't there yet, Luma explained gently. Finlay thought about that. That makes sense, he said. In the Meadow of Maybe, things didn't always start by being real. Sometimes they began as almosts and maybes and nearlies. The shimmer flickered again. Stan leaned forward in Finlay's arms. He could feel it too now, a quiet tug, like curiosity gently pulling on a sleeve. The meadow is trying to show us something, Luma said. But it needs help. Finlay nodded slowly. What kind of help? The kind you're very good at, she replied. Imagination. Finlay looked out across the hills. If it's a map, he said thoughtfully, maybe it needs someone to imagine where it goes. The tiny lantern creature floated closer and glowed a little brighter, as if encouraging him. Finlay crouched down and closed his eyes. He didn't squeeze them tight, he just let them rest, the way he did when listening for distant sounds. He imagined a map. Not a loud map, not a bossy map, a kind map. He pictured soft lines drawing themselves across the air. He imagined gentle paths connecting places that wanted to be found. He imagined small symbols, a leaf for quiet woods, a teacup for friendly places, a star for somewhere special. The meadow grew still. The breeze hushed. Finlay opened his eyes. In front of him, floating just above the grass, thin, glowing lines were slowly appearing. They curved and stretched, sketching themselves into shape. Luma gasped softly. You're making it. Finlay shook his head. I think the meadow is. I'm just helping it decide. The lines brightened. Shapes formed. A tiny drawing of the orange door appeared near the bottom. A winding trail curled outward from it. Little symbols shimmered into place. Hills, ponds, mushrooms, clouds. And at the very top, a new mark appeared. It looked like a spiral made of light. Finlay tilted his head. What's that place? Luma leaned closer, her wings slowing. I don't know, she said quietly. I've never seen that symbol before. The lantern creature floated higher, its glow flickering with excitement. The path beneath Finlay's feet gave a small, curious ripple. Finlay studied the glowing spiral. I think, he said gently, it might be somewhere that hasn't been discovered yet. The meadow seemed to hold its breath. Stan felt it too, that quiet, shining feeling that comes right before a brand new adventure begins. Finlay smiled. Well, he said softly, it's lucky we like exploring. The map shimmered brighter, as if it agreed. The glowing map hovered in the air, peaceful and patient. Finlay looked at it carefully, the way he looked at things he wanted to understand properly. The lines shimmered like threads of moonlight, and the little spiral at the top glowed just a touch brighter than the rest. That must be where we're meant to go, he said softly. Luma floated beside him, her wings making the quietest hum. It does seem to be waiting, she agreed. The tiny lantern creature bobbed in the air and tilted toward the spiral, its light pointing the way like a gentle finger. Stan thought that was very helpful of it. Finlay stood up slowly so he wouldn't disturb the map. All right, he told it kindly. We'll follow. The map responded at once. The glowing trail stretched downward from the spiral and drifted through the air until it touched the ground in front of Finlay's toes. Where it met the grass, the real path shimmered and extended itself forward. It remembered its job now. One step at a time, Finlay said. He stepped forward. The path lengthened. He took another step. It lengthened again. Luma followed, gliding beside him like a floating petal. The lantern creature drifted ahead, lighting the way with its warm, steady glow. The meadow changed as they walked. The hills became rounder, the grass grew softer. The air smelled sweeter, like honey and rain mixed together. They passed a cluster of mushrooms wearing dewdrop hats. They passed a puddle that politely reflected their reflections back at them. They passed a patch of tiny flowers that chimed like bells when the breeze brushed them. Finlay waved to each one. Explorers, he believed, should always greet new places. After a while, the path began to curve gently upward, leading them toward a small rise in the meadow. At the very top sat something Finlay had never seen before. It was not a tree, it was not a rock, it was not a cloud. It was a spiral, not drawn, not flat, a real spiral made of softly glowing air, curling upward like a staircase that had forgotten how to be solid. Finlay stopped at the bottom of the hill. That must be it, he whispered. The spiral shimmered quietly, as though it were pleased to be noticed. Luma hovered near his shoulder. I've never seen anything like it, she said. Finlay looked thoughtful. Maybe it's new, he suggested. Maybe it just became real today. Stan liked that idea very much. The lantern creature floated up the hill and circled the spiral once. Its glow brightened, then settled into a calm shine. "I think it's safe," Finlay said. He placed one careful foot on the hill and walked slowly upward. The path followed him faithfully, stretching behind his heels like a ribbon that didn't want to be left behind. When he reached the top, he stood right in front of the spiral. Up close, it looked even more wonderful. Soft swirls of light turned lazily within it, like cream stirred into tea. It made no sound, but Finlay could feel a gentle feeling coming from it. Not a push, not a pull. An invitation. He glanced at Stan. "Do you think," he asked quietly, "it's something we're supposed to climb?" Stan, who trusted gentle invitations, thought that sounded exactly right. Finlay looked back at the glowing spiral and smiled. "Well," he said softly, "we do like exploring." The spiral shimmered a little brighter. Finlay took a deep breath. The spiral towered above him, curling gently like a ribbon of light stretching into the clouds. It didn't seem solid like a staircase should, yet it felt steady under his feet, soft, safe and kind. Stan wriggled slightly in Finlay's arms, ready but careful. Luma hovered close, her wings fluttering in quiet encouragement. "Take your time," she whispered. "The spiral stair of sky responds best to patience and gentle steps." Finlay nodded. He placed one foot carefully on the glowing spiral. It felt warm, like sunlit water, and firm enough to hold him. Step by step, he began to climb. The spiral swirled upwards slowly. As they ascended, the meadow below became smaller, a quilt of soft colours and gentle shadows. Floating seeds drifted upward alongside them, like tiny lanterns guiding the way. "Look, Stan," Finlay murmured. "Everything looks different from up here." Stan blinked his button eyes. He liked this very much. From up here, even the ordinary hills seemed magical. Even the tiniest flowers looked like hidden treasures. Halfway up, Finlay noticed something wonderful. Small, glowing shapes began drifting toward them from the spiral itself. They were ideas, soft, delicate, almost weightless, and they floated in the air as if curious to see the world from above. Luma smiled. "The spiral stair always shares what it holds," she explained. "It trusts those who climb kindly." Finlay crouched slightly so he wouldn't scare the drifting shapes. "Hello," he whispered. "Thank you for letting us visit." One of the ideas shimmered closer. It looked like a tiny cloud with eyes. Finlay reached out gently, and it floated onto his hand. Warm, soft, friendly. Stan nudged it with his nose. The little idea giggled softly and floated around his head before drifting upward again. The higher they climbed, the more the spiral stair of sky seemed to glow with delight. Finlay realized it was as if the spiral itself was grateful, not just for being climbed, but for being treated with care. Finally, they reached the top. The spiral opened into a wide platform of soft, golden light. Below them, the Meadow of Maybe stretched endlessly, dotted with creatures, paths, and floating ideas. Above them, the sky was a quiet swirl of colour, gentle blues blending into soft pinks and purples. Finlay placed Stan down on the glowing platform. Together they gazed out at the quiet, magical world. "I think," Finlay whispered, "this is what it feels like when imagination and kindness meet." Luma hovered beside him, tiny wings flickering with light. "You've learned something very important today," she said. "Exploration, helpfulness, kindness, and imagination. They grow stronger when shared." Finlay smiled quietly. He looked at Stan and back at the world around them. "And maybe," he said softly, "the best adventures are the ones that make the world a little gentler while you're having them." The spiral stare of sky shimmered one last time, wrapping them in a gentle glow, as if saying, "Well done." And in that soft, golden light, Finlay and Stan realized that their adventure wasn't just about discovering magical places. It was about discovering the quiet power of being kind, thoughtful, and imaginative, wherever they went. The golden glow of the spiral stare of sky slowly faded as Finlay and Stan prepared to descend. Finlay looked down at the Meadow of Maybe below. The paths were steady now, the creatures were happy, and the floating ideas drifted gently among the hills. Everything was as it should be, calm, peaceful, and kind. "I think we've helped more than we realized," Finlay whispered. Stan gave a gentle nod. Even plush dinosaurs have ways of showing quiet pride. Luma hovered beside them, her wings sparkling faintly. "You've reminded the meadow and its creatures about kindness and helpfulness. But now it's time for you to return home." Finlay felt a small tug of sadness. He had grown to love this quiet, magical world. But he knew Luma was right. Adventures, he thought, are best remembered when shared, not hoarded. They stepped carefully down the spiral, each step slow and gentle, feeling the warmth of the glowing path beneath them. Halfway down, the tiny lantern creature floated beside them. It gave a soft glow and circled once before drifting back toward the Meadow of Maybe. "Goodbye, little friend," Finlay said softly. "Thank you for helping us feel welcome." The lantern flickered in a tiny nod. When they reached the meadow's grass, the orange door waited patiently among the roots of the oak tree. Its blue frame shimmered faintly in the afternoon sun. "Back already," Finlay whispered to Stan, who gave a quiet flop of agreement. Luma hovered before the door. "Remember," she said, "the lessons you've learned here, kindness, exploration, imagination, and helpfulness, don't stay in magical meadows. You can carry them wherever you go." Finlay nodded. He felt the truth of her words warm his chest like the softest sunbeam. He hugged Stan gently. "Ready to go home?" Stan gave a very polite nod. Together, they stepped through the tiny door. The garden was quiet, just as it had been that morning. Dew still clung to the grass, and sunlight made gentle stripes across the earth. It felt ordinary, but Finlay knew it wasn't quite the same. He set Stan down carefully. "We had quite an adventure today," he said softly. Stan agreed. Finlay wandered across the grass, looking at each leaf, each flower, each tiny insect. He smiled. "Kindness doesn't need magic," he whispered. "We can explore gently, help others, and imagine things anywhere." The breeze seemed to answer him with a soft sigh. Finlay sat on the grass and watched the clouds drift slowly across the sky. He imagined all the possibilities of tomorrow, quietly and patiently, like seeds ready to grow. Stan curled up beside him, a soft, steady reminder that adventures, and the lessons they teach, could always come along. And as the sun lowered in the sky, Finlay felt a calm happiness he had never felt before. The kind that comes from knowing that even small acts of kindness, imagination, and helpfulness can make the world a little brighter. The tiny blue door in the oak tree waited quietly, just in case tomorrow brought another gentle adventure. And somewhere, in a meadow not far from here, a path smiled quietly, knowing it had been remembered. Finlay and Stan, the boy and his dinosaur, had learned the true magic of exploration, that the greatest adventures grow from the quietest acts of kindness. The end.